Permission granted.
So welcome back to a new video of our coordination from Amnesty International Italia. I make a little introduction in Italian just to be sure that everyone understands what we are doing. Benvenuti e benvenute a un nuovo video del nostro coordinamento di Amnesty International per l'Africa Centrale e l'Africa Orientale. Oggi, oltre a me, Simona e Lidia del coordinamento, abbiamo l'onore di avere con noi Alexandra Budabin e Lisa Ann Richey, scusate la pronuncia, ma non sono facili da pronunciare come noi, che sono autrici di un libro molto interessante che si chiama Batman Saves the Congo, e adesso faremo questa intervista in inglese per essere un pochino più facilitati tutti quanti nell'esprimerci. Il libro racconta, e adesso lo approfondiremo insieme alle nostre due autrici, di come le figure dei personaggi famosi e comunque in generale si va a approfondire quello che è il mondo della raccolta fondi, ma quanto anche il ruolo dei personaggi famosi in qualche modo ha inciso nell'evoluzione di questo aspetto, che in qualche modo impatta fortemente anche l'area geografica nella quale noi lavoriamo come coordinamento. So, hi Lisa, hi Alexandra.
Hello.
Hello.
I started with the first question, and I think that Simona and Lydia, then they can do other questions, but I start. As I already said in Italian, your book for us is very interesting because actually explain very well something that in the last years started to be more clear even for people that work in the NGOs, and so how the VIP, very important person, or famous people impact in the fundraising for African countries, and not only African countries. So, of course, you work at the university, you are a professor, your background, we know that your background is about Africa and about human rights and about fundraising. So how did you have the idea to start work on this project? This is the first question, but we need to start from this point to understand better the other points later.
Sure. Thank you. Jonathan, do you want to start with how we got into this?
I think you take it and then I'll add.
Okay. Well, I'll say how I got.
A little later.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give credit to Alex for how we got into this particular book. Maybe I'd like to talk a little bit about how I got into the study of celebrities when all of my previous work had been based on ethnographic work in health clinics and interviews with farmers and traders and people in Uganda and Tanzania and South Africa, and understanding humanitarianism and development aid. And to be honest with you, I still joke a little, having now written 2 books on celebrities, that I'm still not an expert on celebrities, but I'm very interested in how power works in African politics, and particularly in terms of trying to help internationally. And it's something where the work I was doing on the ground, looking at basically about who had power in terms of agenda setting, in terms of interventions when a crisis would strike. It was really a surprise to me to find out that there were business people and celebrities that were getting called into meetings, and what, why it was that these people were actually having an impact on the ground was something that I thought I needed to actually pay more attention to be able to understand. I'm a political scientist, so to be able to understand more about the politics, both, as you have already pointed out, about the world of fundraising, which we can speak a little bit more about later. But for me, most importantly, about who sets the agenda about interventions in Africa. What is a good intervention? What is a not good intervention? Who gets to decide? So that's where celebrities became surprisingly important to me.
And your network?
You want to talk about? Yeah. And so there were other people who started taking them seriously, maybe. And Alex was definitely one of the first who was like, yeah, actually, this is elite politics. Like, we political scientists have already studied it in terms of agenda setting and how it is that people actually decide to take on or not take on a particular cause. And so we started a network of scholars looking at celebrities in North-South relations so that we could take a social science approach to understanding celebrities. I mean, interesting work has been done on celebrities and performance and, artistic merits and things like that. But for us, it was much more about the sort of nuts and bolts. We kind of laugh about the boring stuff, but when you put a celebrity on it, then often people, and students in particular, might become more interested.
And I was also brought to Denmark as a student, just like you, Simona, and I had been working on a dissertation on the Save Darfur movement. And because Lisa was starting to draw attention to celebrities, it made me look back at this movement and at the role of celebrities like George Clooney and Don Cheadle and Mia Farrow and also Angelina Jolie, and what role they had played in raising awareness to Darfur and the impact that they had had on mobilization, not only in the US, but also globally.
Can I also say that one of the other things Alex did was to point out what we found and document a lot in this book, which is it's not just that celebrities come in, they take up space from other people. And her, I'm going to plug your PhD work, but her work really showed that there were plenty of people who were Sudanese, who had been organizing, and who were basically systematically silenced because of power relations. And this is something that we see a lot. So we come in, I have said a lot, celebrities are the oligarchs of the attention economy. They're the best at getting attention. They do it in a way that Amnesty can't do. They do it in a way that professors can't do. They do it in a way that often grassroots organizations can't do. And that's why we need to take them seriously. What kind of attention are they actually bringing in, and to what things and for what purposes?
Because we're on video, I can use this gesture, which was when I interviewed the director of the Save Darfur Coalition, and he had said, well, attention to Darfur had been flat, and then George Clooney arrived. Flat and up.
Okay, thanks for your reply. Simona, do you want to ask something, or I can continue?
No, of course you can continue. Yeah, maybe
Okay.
we can keep question for the end.
Okay, before to go deeper inside the book, I think everyone that see for the first time your book as a question that of course is stupid, but I think that this question can introduce better what we are going to talk about. Why you decided to call the book Batman Saved the Congo? I know that probably many people ask you this, but of course I think it's important to understand this point.
Well, we have the cultural symbolism there, and a parallel story, because Ben Affleck, even though he had decided to commit himself to the cause of the Congo and create an organization and gather resources and visit Congress and make important speeches, he had also kept his day job. And he was chosen as, I don't know, the 4th or 5th Batman.
I've lost count.
We've lost count. And so there were all sorts of jokes being made by congressmen, by journalists, by human rights observers, about whether Ben Affleck or whether Batman is going to come save Congo. So this was, part of the media coverage of his work. And then we have a teenage son who is responsible. So Lisa?
Yeah. My son titled the book, basically, because he heard us talking about this project. And he said, oh, Mom, you should call that book Batman Saves Congo. And in many ways, we're like, yeah, actually, that's surprisingly resonant, both in terms of how Batman works as this sort of dark superhero who's supposed to come in without any real superpowers, by the way. We have a little bit of the story of the imaginary fictitious Batman in the book, which I don't know if you guys know enough about him, but he was a billionaire, right? He was this kind of elite philanthropist, Batman, right? Who then decided he had to avenge the death of his parents and to go around saving Gotham City. And so there's a lot of sort of interesting symbolism about, what is this white saviorism, which is really what we're documenting in this book, which makes Ben Affleck or any individual human being coming from another place think that they should or could save someone else. So that really gets into a lot of what we talk about. One of the things which was also a little funny is that I have a quote, which is what we use. Can I read from the book?
Yeah, of course.
Sure. It's because we use this quote to start the conclusion, which was one of the informants that I had interviewed when I was in Kinshasa, who literally looked at me before we had titled the book and said, I don't think Batman is going to save Congo. So that was, part of the provocation about why we named the book Batman Saves the Congo. It's a little bit of irony, of course, but also because this is very much the dominant narrative about how Westerners, white people, people from the North have imagined themselves, but also been imagined by others.
Okay, I try to find a link between what you are saying and the next question that I have, that actually is not so easy, because even in Italian is not so easy. So I try to do this question. Do you think that there is a difference between the whiteness and the blackness of celebrities? I mean, there is a different message between a celebrity that act and maybe start some projects in Africa or in South Asia or whatever, and the skin color. I mean, we know that white color now is a privilege, or we call privilege, but even a famous actor or a famous celebrity that is not white is different. The message, the action, the situation. I don't know if it's clear what I'm saying.
Sure. You want me to talk a moment about this?
I
think I understand you, Jonathan, which is the question about whether or not being a celebrity makes a difference for the politics of race and intervention, whether or not people see you differently, whether maybe all celebrities somehow embody the power of whiteness. And I think that that's where I would make the distinction between, a problem of whiteness and white supremacy and white power and colonialism isn't a problem of the color of the skin and the kind of body you're in, but it's a problem of history in which people are able to use this power that has been embodied by people who have a certain body, like we all have on this call. And so can non-white people embody this power because they're celebrities? Perhaps. But what they often do is simply reinforce the same values about an underclass, right? About Congolese who somehow need saving, about people who haven't been able already to organize their own social movements, who have perpetuated these kinds of narratives about crisis, about confusion, about failed states. We know all these narratives, and that those are racialized narratives. So it doesn't, in the end, mean that you could just substitute in one person for another. This is a problem of structural racism, right? It goes on, long after we might have changed the skin color of a particular agent, and we have to deal with the structural power that has been left in place. I think, maybe the other thing is just to think about this long history of foreign intervention in Congo and this kind of Batman saves the Congo type narrative. And that was one of the things, while we think that there's something quite new about the way celebrities and other philanthropists, of this sort of Bill Gates variety are working in terms of how they set the stage in development and humanitarianism. The historical roots for this are so deep. It isn't that it's the first time, right, that a very empowered, well-meaning and well-resourced white man has come in to try to do some good thing in the Congo. Actually, quite the contrary. So that's one of the things we trace, quite significantly in a lot of depth in the book, because it's important, I think, if you're going to critique these things, not to just say, oh, it's a problem with this particular celebrity, as I think you were alluding to. There's more of a problem with the modality, with the way in which power structures work, than a problem with a particular individual. Individuals can be very well-meaning, but if they're operating within these same elite structures of power, where certain kinds of people are given voice and given authority and credibility, and other kinds of people aren't, for reasons that don't have to do with their own actual work or intellectual output or, devotion to the cause, but have more to do with well, the fact that they're popular and people think they're fantastic. So I think that's where celebrity works quite differently. Sorry, that was a long answer.
And if I can add on to it, that being Africa seems to be the place of choice for celebrities from the Western world. And so it was interesting to see how Ben Affleck chose the Congo, because he was choosing it, recognizing that certain other countries in Africa had been chosen by other celebrities. So there's distribution of celebrity power across the continent, and also a need for a celebrity to assert themselves and personalize and brand themselves, that led Ben Affleck to not only take a tour of all the conflict-affected countries in Africa that might have been of interest, but to choose one that wasn't associated so well with one celebrity in particular. And all of these things echo history in very disturbing ways.
Abbiamo un rumore di sottofondo. Okay.
Sì, no, scusate, mi è comparso un pop-up in Chrome che non c'entrava, ma senza che io girassi Chrome, cioè proprio tutto, perché ho Chrome aperto sotto e quindi a un certo punto ho deciso che doveva...
Tagliamo, non è un problema. Really thanks, Lisa and Alessandra. Simone, do you have something to add or to ask to our guest? Or
are you done with the questions, or?
But I can continue later.
Yes, yeah, no, because I do have some questions about
No, don't worry.
The framework that you're using, but I would like just introduce the book, and then maybe we can have a discussion about like the theoretical aspects too, because maybe right now people are more interested in getting the story of the book. Yeah. So.
No, don't worry. No, because I don't know if you have something, please raise your hand, or I don't know what, because I can. Okay. So Lisa and Alexandra, I have another question. Is about in your book. Actually, you do some. You speak about you talk about something very sometimes specific. You talk about Ben Affleck, Congo, and so on. But for example, there is other example that we can do actually, which is what I want to know is what I am trying to ask is why do you think that could be a difference between the impact of celebrities in, for example, in fundraising or in NGOs project in countries, for example, in African countries or in countries in South Asia, and in the country of Western world. I mean, even in the Western world, we have the action, we have the celebrities are involved in projects in fundraising, but which is the difference between the two contexts? Probably for us that we work in NGOs or in no-profit sectors is easier to understand, but I'm not sure that everyone can understand the difference of the impact of famous people and celebrities in the two different approach and the two different economic situation. I don't know if it's clear what I'm asking, or I try to ask you better. I don't know, because I wrote some questions, but some hands were some questions, but I'm just modifying what I want to ask when you reply, because I found something interesting during your speech, so now I'm just modifying what I want to ask. So if there is something that is not clear, please let me know, and I can do another question. Or
you did break up for a moment, so I don't think we understood well the two different situations.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
I understand celebrities and their impact on fundraising, but we didn't understand the two contexts that you referred.
The two contexts in my mind is, one is, for example, in African countries and South Asian countries, where often celebrities are used by the NGOs or whatever to reach more people, to collect more money, and so on. And at the same time, even in Western countries, we have celebrities that are used by NGOs or whatever. But I think that the result is not the same. I don't know if I think that you thought about that during your job, no? I mean, because one of the main goal is to explain which is the impact in the African and South Asian countries. But at the same time, we have the same in Western countries. Which is the difference? Maybe it's easier like in this way than the question.
So raising money for distant causes rather than in comparison, raising money for causes. I think Lisa has something.
Do you want me to talk about
Sure.
that? Okay. Well, I mean, I think one thing that we should really keep in mind, okay, is that there is now with Sustainable Development Goals an understanding that what we've had historically as a sort of north-south or an east-west divide in terms of socioeconomic levels, in terms of poverty, in terms of racism, we see a different world. And so it is much more that we still have communities like in our own countries in Europe, which are impoverished and which are victims of these kinds of savior narratives. So one thing to say is that there's not a clear divide. Now, that being said, there's still clearly a difference between whether or not you can have, as is traditionally expected from many activists, nonprofit, NGO or third sector organizations, some local accountability. The idea is that if you are working on a cause, for example, in Italy, as an organization, and people give a lot of money, and then they don't see anything happening, right? You can see that there is much more accountability in terms of local communities. One of the biggest difficulties that we find with many of these interventions, including the ones that we study in Eastern Congo, is that long chain of accountability. Now, what celebrities and very media savvy organizations do is they produce a lot of very compelling content. They're able to give us beautiful pictures of very grateful recipients, of schools that have been built, of women getting water. We all know those images, but that's not real accountability. We don't really know what is happening in those communities, what communities think of each other. And so then we actually get a perception that the organization that has the best video content or maybe the cutest things on TikTok is actually the one doing the best work. Now, there's a strong correlation between that organization and the ones that work with, for example, big business. Starbucks, great publicity, selling products. They manage also to sell causes. This is something Eastern Congo Initiative, partnered up with. We did work on the ground in Eastern Congo with Congolese coffee farmers, where we found out not that they were doing bad things, but that the good things they were claiming to do, revitalizing the entire Eastern Congolese coffee sector, had already been done for over a decade by old school mainstream development organizations. Now, these organizations, which didn't have the same media capacity, which didn't have the same budget for producing content, really didn't get the credit. Right? People didn't know they were saving Congolese farmers. And so then that credit went to Starbucks. And so celebrities like Ben Affleck got up in front of the United States Congress and said, we have this successful collaboration between USAID, which is the US Bilateral Development Donor Organization, Ben Affleck's organization, the Eastern Congo Initiative, and the global coffee chain Starbucks. And this is a way in which we are revitalizing the coffee sector. So because they were able to produce this content, they were able to actually get credit for work, which had been done for over a decade by NGOs, which had been working on the ground, even with the same exact coffee cooperatives, and sometimes with exactly the same farmers. So it's that kind of divide, which, when you have distant chains of accountability, it's very difficult to know. And I think that's one of the things that's different. One of the other quotations that we had, I was going to read you from the book, which was Howard French, which you may know him from his expertise as United States ambassador in Africa, he wrote, as a region of the world, Africa is virtually alone in being consigned to people with thin expertise and little policy background to shape and guide American diplomacy. Celebrities like Bono, George Clooney, and Ben Affleck are looked to help set priorities and to galvanize public interest. That this should be necessary must be seen as a failure of the policy establishment itself to think more creatively and with more ambition about such a large part of the world. What I think he got right, of course, is the fact that we have systematically forgotten to think creatively about Africa, Southeast Asia, parts of Latin America, because somehow it's been put as an other part of the world. What he's gotten wrong, though, is that there are plenty of people very interested in coming to develop, quote unquote, the resources in Congo, because they are extremely valuable. And these corporations are now coming in to partner with non-governmental organizations, with development agencies, and that they will then set the agenda and have influence because they're very good at getting the attention of the public.
I continue, Simona? See? Okay.
Yeah, we can keep my question for the end.
No, don't worry.
So I don't want to interrupt. Yeah.
Okay. I try to connect myself with this last part, and because one of my curiosity when I read the book was if I think about this topic, the first thing that I have in my mind is, for example, Lady D. I mean, no, probably in my mind, the beginning of this kind of things starts with Lady D. But from that moment, and probably there is something before for sure, but my mind is just something short. From that moment till now, do you think that something has changed? And another thing that I want to ask you is, okay, we are now talking about the criticism of celebrities in fundraising and so on. But do you think that, did you find in your research or during your job some good practices that maybe we can suggest to someone? There is something good or that we can see, that we use, that we can take example?
Okay, I think we're going to take this in two parts, because I'll talk about something new, and then I'll hand it over to Lisa to talk about what can be done about the something new. And I want to say that something new is the role of strategic consultants that connect celebrities to the humanitarian world. Our colleague Dan Brockington wrote about Lady Di and how she was brought into the issue of landmines. And from what I remember of the story, the NGO approached her directly and got a meeting with her and posed the question, would you like to join us? And she said yes. Okay. So this wonderful meeting, intimate meeting, is not what happens anymore. And what you have is now an industry of strategic consultants that work to connect celebrities to causes. And choose causes and choose roles for the celebrities, and gauge commitment, and basically stage the celebrities in a particular way that's going to sell well and be believable by a public while not alienating a celebrity's fans. And so that goes back a bit to the question before about the causes between domestic and international. A celebrity also is their and so to help them brand and not to pick a cause that's too political or too provocative, you've got this field of strategic consultants. And we also now have celebrity-led organizations. So it's not enough to just be hooked up with an NGO. Celebrities are going out on their own and reasserting themselves even more by creating their own organizations. So Affleck is not the first to create his own organization, not the first to create an organization and partner with major corporations and visit Congress and promote business models for development. And he's not the only one being helped with some serious consultants behind him. Now, what can be done about the way that development and humanitarianism have been shaped because of this? I hand over to your, I was thinking of the
you need to say what you think I should say.
I was thinking the nice, because we end in the conclusion with some advice about how to get around and how to use celebrities in a meaningful way, and perhaps avoid the professionalization that the consultants have brought to the field to a more authentic helping. So I will find that.
While you find that, can I tell my Lady Di story?
Oh, you have a Lady Di. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna say another plug for our colleague Dan Brockington's book on celebrity advocacy and development, because he actually interviewed the celebrity liaison officers that were involved with getting Lady Di in promotion of the anti-landmines campaign. So definitely look him up, and you probably want to interview him as well. But so who's contemporary Lady Di? Let me tell you, as you probably know, I went to Kinshasa because one of the things that was really important was to understand how other humanitarian workers found the celebrity impact. Okay, because we think about impact. Impact isn't just at the last on recipients. Impact is all the way down the chain of interventions, from agenda setting at the global level, right, to how you get implementation, coordination, institutional relationships, and all the way to recipients, what happens. So when I was going around in Kinshasa, Congo, interviewing non-celebrity humanitarians, you know, people who were working in the humanitarian and aid and development sectors, I had a really good time, because I would tell people that I was doing a book on Ben Affleck and talking about celebrity humanitarianism. And almost everyone that I interviewed at a certain level of, you know, elite status in Congo in the humanitarian sector had a story to tell me about Angelina Jolie. So it was very funny to me that I would ask about Ben Affleck, and they would always talk to me about Angelina, about the time they met Angelina. I have an informant who shared with me a beautiful personal photograph that we're used, which has Angelina and this informant and Angelina carrying a beautiful rooster. The whole idea, okay, is that Angelina is able to do exactly what Lady Di was able to do, which is what's so powerful. And I'm going to tell you what she can do. In the words of one of my informants, right, she can just turn on caring. You just talk to her and you know that she cares, right? But in the same way she turns it on, when she's done, she turns it off. She is an actress. She is an amazing performer, right? It isn't that she is expected to care any less than the rest of us. There's no reason to think celebrities are bad people or malevolent or, you know, don't want to do good in the world. But the difference is that they're able to perform it. And that is what feels legitimate. That's not what is legitimate. It's what feels right when we see them. Oh, they really care. And at the end of the day, this is where we get with we end up getting a real problem with accountability, right? Is because this performance of authenticity is given more credit, it's given more value than, well, real authenticity, which is more about what do organizations do on the ground? What do recipients actually need? What is the relationship over time between organizations and their interlocutors? So what was interesting for us is that this is something that's a really important part of the narrative, is this performance of caring, and that, you know, Lady Di can do it, Angelina can do it. It is a very gendered performance, right? But Ben Affleck also manages to very clearly in his videos and in his picture, I remember from Glamour magazine, which we use a lot, shows Ben Affleck listening very actively. You can see him in this photo and see he's listening to women. And, you know, per carita, you get a famous white man listening to African women. Interestingly, that disrupts people's ideas about how these kinds of things should take place and makes them go, oh, he's so authentic. Well, my point is, it's about what we expect from these performances. And there are very gendered and racialized reasons why Ben Affleck counts as caring, because he listens to African women. Lots of African men listen to African women too, and they don't often get much credit for that. So, sorry, did you want to go back to what you want to read from the book?
So, I mean, we had some advice that we give in the conclusion around what could be done with all of that celebrity attention, how to better use it. And so we start with Ben Affleck's own assertion that, quote, in the modern age, there is a currency to celebrity, and you can spend it in a lot of ways, or you can squander it. And we ask, then why not invest it in democratic politics, social protection, and global justice movements work on local material alliances? Why not use your wealth and charisma to convene visionary voices and then quietly hold the audience in the room while they speak, not as product spokespersons, but about their agenda and not yours?
Thank you for finding that.
Thank you. Actually, I have the last question that is not easy to do, like the previous one, but actually I tried to make it, or we can cut, of course, if there is something that is not clear, and I try to explain you better. My last question, then I don't know if Lydia or Simona want to ask you something more, or you want to add something that I didn't ask you, is about the risk in our mind between if an organization use a celebrity. I think, following my experience, for example, I worked in Senegal for a long time, and I saw that there is a risk sometimes between the Western beliefs and the African beliefs. I mean, if we use a celebrity, for example, I was in my office with a person from Senegal, and she saw this advertisement, and she told, oh, this person is a very famous person, but this person is gay. So she react something like, okay, they are trying to bring these values in our country using the advertisement. So she was doing something like a division between what was Western and what was not Western. Do you think that there is this risk that by the local people, I mean, with local people, I mean the people that live in the countries where this advertisement, this campaign, they try to help these countries? Do you think that by local people, they can react looking at this fundraising campaign or advertisement, something like that we as Western people, we are trying to impose them values or something that they don't like? I hope that is clear what I'm asking. If it's not clear, please try to explain. I mean, sometimes there is a difference, a comparison between what is not Western and what is Western by people that live in some African countries or in Asia, and they see these Western celebrities like a risk. This is what I saw, and this is my experience. Do you think that this is another point of what you are talking about celebrities in advertisement, in fundraising? I don't know if you ever thought about this point or not. I hope that is clear. Sorry.
I want to just say how pleased I am, actually, Jonathan, to hear that you actually are asking your colleagues in Senegal what they think of these advertisements that are meant to represent, things, ideas, interventions to them and about them. I think that's unfortunately much of what we see in terms of communication, right, is developed without any consultation by any representatives of local communities. And so I think it's really important that we do that at all levels, whether we use celebrities or not. One thing which I would point out is that it's so important how celebrities themselves tend to be used to represent particular kinds of elite values, okay? And what you're bringing up is a question about who gets to decide what are legitimate values to represent, right? Who gets to decide, is it okay that, you know, because we have the money to make a campaign or because we're going to give particular, you know, kinds of assistance, that then we say, well, you know, our rules, you know, are like this and you all have to follow along. I think these are huge debates and they go back really to the fundamentals of what development or humanitarianism is. I mean, development for me, I came into this a million years ago as a scholar of human rights, because what was really interesting to me about development is we're assuming what is the good life from a political philosophy standard, and then we're trying to go and give it to somebody else. And there's something really difficult about that when you start to engage people in a democratic fashion and you find out that people within any country, I mean, we look at Italian politics, for example, have very different ideas about what is the good life and whether they should be able to have it in one way or another. So I think the difficulty I see is that humanitarianism and development have never been democratic endeavors. It's never been, hey, let's get the people who have the power and the people who don't have the power together in a room and talk about what's best for everybody. That's not how power works, okay? And so celebrities don't work like that either. What sometimes is the case is people want to say, oh, celebrity humanitarianism, that's the bad humanitarianism, as opposed to all the rest of what we've been doing really good and accountable and democratic. And you all have worked in this field a long time. You know that it's a field that has been always fraught with power relations, with disputes, with conflicts. You know, this is an area of high contention. What's important now is that we take up proper discussions about who has the right to control what the content is, just like you were talking about doing with, you know, with your own colleagues and advisors. And then you have to come with them together and come to some solutions, right? So I don't think that it's something where we can say, oh, you know, celebrities just take liberties to do whatever they want, even though sometimes they do. We have some great examples of that. Celebrities, because they're so popular, they often get around the usual rules of accountability, which then causes problems maybe for their NGO or their donor partner collaborators, because, you know, you can't just do what you want if you're getting money from the United Nations or if you're getting money from USAID, right? You have certain kinds of transparency and accountability procedures that you must follow. But I think that this also applies to all organizations. So, I mean, not to be academic and say, well, you know, celebrities are only part of the problem, but celebrities are only part of the problem. The useful thing for us is why we wrote a whole book about a particular celebrity intervention, is it gives you this keyhole that you can look through to then start to explain entire histories of relations of power. And that's what we think is so important. And to be able to do what you said, you know, call people together into a room, whether it's literally or whether it's conceptually or theoretically, and say, you know, who has the right to decide and how do we agree that we all profit from these collaborations, whether we're NGOs or whether we're beneficiaries or whether we're business collaborators or whether we're donors. If we all profit, then we all need to share the rewards and the surplus, right, from this profit. It shouldn't just be that the profit goes to Starbucks or the profit goes to Ben Affleck's organization, right? We need to talk about accountable ways of sharing, you know, those spoils, those profits. And I think that those are conversations that we're starting to have. Let me stop saying that. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Perfect, thanks. Simone, I don't know if you have a question, but there is a question from Lydia on our WhatsApp. I don't know if you can ask you this question, because maybe it's easier.
Yeah.
And maybe you can add something more. And Lisa, Alessandra, if there is something that we didn't ask you and you want to add, please do that. But we have the last question from Lydia because she has some problem with the connection. So
Lydia would like to know if you know to what the extent to which celebrities are interested into checking out the results of their of their projects and whatever. So she'd like to know if really like the celebrities are interested afterwards in seeing the results and checking on the process. That's her question.
Yeah. You want to take that? I have two different responses to that.
Okay.
It's just a bit strange, and well, first of all, I mean, I think it's important that we shouldn't think that celebrities by their intentions are any less interested in anybody else. So it's not that I think, or that we argue in our book, that celebrities don't care, doesn't matter to them. What's the problem here is the way in which we have this acceleration of the media logic, right? Which is that just like, consumers or activists or, democratic citizens who see someone say, look, this is good, and they don't really think about what comes after, right? Celebrities in their own day job can't be returning every 5 years to see how it's going in Congo, right? Their own work requires them to do other things. And like any kind of development or humanitarian organization or intervention, right, there's a question about short-term versus long-term effects. So it isn't so much that I would argue that celebrities don't care about the effects, but that the way in which, they need to produce new content. At some point, Ben Affleck will need to be doing something different, maybe in Congo, maybe elsewhere. The problem with the media and the way in which people get interested in things, right, for entertainment is it needs to be new, it needs to be exciting. And as you probably know from your own work, you need to produce new content to keep people interested. And the reality is that most of the world's real problems and disasters and crises are long-term, right? They're protracted situations. Poverty, right, doesn't continue to be on the agenda in spite of the fact that it is, the biggest global disaster that we're currently facing. We're seeing some of the things with climate change because it's not new, because it's not sexy, because it's not exciting. We don't have a news hook. So I think we need to think about the fact that celebrities do have a day job, and their day job is in entertainment. So those cycles are very different than the cycles that we need for long-term engagement, solidarity, development, anything that you would think about as real long-term partnership.
And we saw that in the example of Affleck's work in the Congo, because when he arrived, when he took up the cause of Congo after careful selection, he decided to take up security sector reform, which was unusual because that's seen as a bit tougher and more complex than, say, the development and poverty and education. And when the and his narratives are making a difference, when Congo was suddenly revealed to have even more security problems than ever, he shifts. So he didn't stick with it. He didn't say, I'm going to do this for the long term, even if we don't see the gains, even if that my vision is working and my advice to the US government and where he was expecting to see short-term gains. While at the same time, what we were studying was he's still setting down the grounds for a long-term idea that business is meant to come and do development better than the rest.
Thanks, that's a big point.
Lisa, Alexandra, really thanks, because for us, I think this is one of the most interesting interviews that we have done, actually for me, but I think even for Simona and Lydia, this is very interesting, and this is part of our daily job. So I think that is an honor for us to meet you. And I don't know if you want to add something, or please, Simona, if you have, please stop me. But if you can show us again the cover of your book, because we can.
We can all show it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And so, if you don't want to add something more that we didn't ask you, I'm really sorry for the question, but actually, as I explained you, you told us something very interesting. So my mind was something, oh, I have to take this from this point, I have to take that from that other point. So I was just a bit confused, but we have done it. So really thanks, because I think that the interview is very interesting. So I think, credo che sono bloccate.
Shall I stop the registration?
Okay, I don't know where our guests are now, because I think that they have some problem with the connection, but we will upload the interview on our YouTube channel. In italiano, l'abbiamo perso, ok. Beh, finiamo, insomma, finiremo, abbiamo finito la nostra intervista. Ah, eccole, sono tornate, credo, così le risalutiamo.
Here you are. Can you hear us?
Le vedo bloccate. Ah, ok.
State, siamo tornate.
Oh, okay. No, because I think that you had some problem with the connection, but we were saying that we were saying thanks to you for your participation, and that we will upload the video on YouTube channel. So, and if someone else want to know more about your book, maybe they can write us, and we can try to put you in contact if you are available. And thanks again, Lisa, and thanks, Alexandra.
Yeah.
Thanks, Simona and Lydia. I don't know if our guests are here. Okay. And okay, in Italiano, because actually this is very interesting. Okay, please.
Okay, yeah, got it.
But
Perfect.
Siamo tornate.
Yeah. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I do have. I don't know if it's really a question, either comment, either like I'd like to discuss this issue more, because I do really. I'm dealing with the concept of power also for my thesis, and usually that was I'm focusing on, like power in North and South relationships, and especially how power is able to shape narratives, and those narratives inform the power and sustain it and recreate it. So it's a reproduction of the power also through narratives. So you were talking about how the Congo is framed through those narratives, and we do understand that basically Congo needs help, and we just think that Congo needs help, and it's us who have to save it, basically. And we're not even presented with another possibility. We're not even presented with the possibility that actually Congo do want to save himself by its own. Like, I don't know if that's if I'm clear, but the idea is that Congo is not even given the possibility to say something about itself, and that's, I think, the main issue. I've been dealing right now with Velux. It's a Danish company that produces like windows and this kind of stuff. And they're right now inaugurating this project in Uganda to absorb the CO2 emissions. It's a very nice project, actually. And they're also caring a lot about the local communities, because they're engaging with WWF, Uganda especially. But the main issue, the project has just started, so I don't really have any means to assess the results of the problem, and that's not what I'm caring about. But the issue is that the narrative that they use is just about how Velux has a plan to save Mother Nature. And it's again this white savior that has a plan to save everyone else in the name of science. And that's another issue that I wanted to raise with your book. The fact that we know we can save others because we do have the knowledge to save that, we do have the knowledge to do that. It's like we, as the northern world, the Westerners, do have the knowledge to create development, because development is something that's upon us. I don't know, and that's very interesting. And we do really need to problematize this. We do need to understand that development is not just that thing that we think. development is a word, and words do have different meanings. But also power, because words are super powerful. As Cornwell said, words, they make words. Yeah, it's very nice to say it in English, but in Italian is le parole creano I mondi. Mm-hmm. So we do not see the reality, but we do create and represent realities. And we do really have to pay attention to that. And I really think that with your book, you're raising this issue fantastically. So thank you so much for it. Yeah. I don't know if it's a comment or I don't know. It was just something that I really wanted to say.
Thank you, Simona.
Thank you so very much. You want to say a little bit about the narrative and power? I mean, that is a really important.
It's been an important thread of the book, and actually, you know, having the space to write a book was let us go and move in different ways, and one of those was historically, and it was very interesting to go back 100 years to see when there were movements to save the Congo. That was when we see some of these narratives around a helpless, barbaric, backwards Congo being presented to the world as a call for saving from external forces and actors. And so none of this is recent. It's something that accompanies humanitarianism. Also being able to go beyond Affleck and his organization to look at other Congolese organizations and the narratives that they put forward. So there are dominant narratives about Congo, but there are plenty of other narratives out there that aren't getting the space. And there, you know, it almost seems, you know, the decision of Ben Affleck to create his own organization and establish his own narratives is a shame, when he could have really been partnered with a Congolese organization and amplified their narratives. Yeah. And then the last thing I would say is when you bring a corporation into the mix, suddenly you have marketing logics that are going to dictate these narratives. And for sure, the agency of the Congolese people is going to be left off the storyboard, because otherwise, why would you need the savior of the celebrity, the corporation, and we here buying the coffee?
Yeah. But it's again, the same, it's always the same thing. I mean, the issue is always how, it's not really what's the problem, because we do not know what's the problem. It's more about how the problem is represented to be, as Baki said. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Carol Baki is great. Absolutely. What is the problem represented to be? And what we know about all of the problems that we have, you know, studied in this book is that they're all represented in very historically specific kinds of narratives. And these narratives have these consistent threads of power. And it's really important that, you know, all the old issues which we talk about, we are also interpretivists, but we also recognize that there are material discourses that we have to take very seriously. And one of the things which is so important is to always think about who profits, okay? Literally, in our example, you know, we have Theo's chocolate or Tom's shoes or Starbucks coffee who profit. But in every single representation of some grateful recipient, there is somebody who's profiting from that representation. And to the extent that those grateful recipients are not receiving their rightful share of the profit, then the relationship we see is exploitation. And so it's really important to continue to notice it, to change it, to, you know, not that you can idealistically just say, oh, look, here's a problem and everybody will stop doing it. That's not how power works. But you can mobilize, you know, individuals, activists, organizations like Amnesty, which makes such a difference by pulling together people, you know, to actually push for social change. And so I think that that's something which is really important, and that we shouldn't let a celebrity, you know, be assumed to embody the will of, you know, this sort of democratic will of a lot of people. Lots of people need to come together, right, and express what is their own preference. And, you know, those are kinds of things that organizations do and have done historically. And I think there's still a place for that. So that's also why we wanted to talk to you, because you work in that world. And that is work that Amnesty does. I have an old friend in Tanzania who is now passed, but he was released from prison because of, you know, an old-fashioned Amnesty letter writing campaign. So that's something that, that does also make a difference. And I think that's something where, we also think it's very important not to simply look at new actors and alliances as if they didn't depend on the old actions of also, historically based development organizations. That's what we found very clearly in our book. They use the exact same organizations, the exact same mechanisms for creating development, but then take credit as if that was something new, and as if somehow those organizations were not quite business savvy enough. And what's really important is to realize businesses profit from the fact that organizations have been working on the ground, for a long time and develop relationships, and that those relationships have a value. So that value needs to be something that's also taken into consideration.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again, Lisa. Thank you again, Alexandra. Thank you, Simone and Lydia. So we already saw the cover of your book, but I repeat the title. So the name of the book is Batman Saved the Congo, and the editor is the University of Minnesota. So if you want to have more info about the book, you can contact us, and we can maybe send the questions to the professors, so maybe they can reply. And I think that they are very nice, and they can reply even later to some question if you have when you see our video. And thank you again. And we hope to see you in Bologna, or I don't know where, in Italy or in Denmark.
We were just going to say that we also have a wonderful website and a lineup of events that are now in presence, which is a real treat for us. And so many of them will be in Italy. So we'll be very happy for you to share the website and to meet some of you in person.
We hope so. Okay. Thank you again, Lisa. Thank you again, Alessandra.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your work. Grazie. Ciao.
Prego. Simona, we can stop the